Hold on to your political teacups, because I'm about to serve you the most delicious slice of Westminster drama since Boris Johnson decided to throw his own garden party during lockdown. When I say Zia Yusuf has plans to destroy Nigel Farage, I don't mean literally, though given the political carnage we've witnessed lately, you be forgiven for checking. No, this is about something far more explosive. The former Reform UK chairman turned Department of Government Efficiency boss who's now playing political chess while Farage is still figuring out checkers. Welcome back to UK Pancakes, where we flip political narratives faster than actual pancakes on Shrove Tuesday. Today's breakfast special features Zia Yusuf, the multimillionaire British Muslim who went from running Reform UK to potentially running rings around his former boss. And trust me, this story has more twist than a pretzel factory during an earthquake. So grab your morning brew and prepare for a political thriller that makes House of Cards look like a children's bedtime story. But here's the absolutely mental part that'll blow your mind. We're watching a man who quit as Reform chairman just 2 months ago now positioning himself as a party's government efficiency guru while simultaneously exposing the very contradictions that could bring down Farage's entire political project. It's like watching someone resign from the fire brigade and then return as the arsonist investigator. Let's start with the man himself, because Zia Yusuf isn't your average political operative. Born in 1986 in Bells Hill, North Lanarkshire, to Sri Lankan parents who both work for the NHS, Yusuf represents everything Reform UK claims to champion: successful immigration, entrepreneurial spirit, and British patriotism. Except there's one tiny problem. He quit as party chairman after just 11 months over what's been described as a burqa row, which sounds less like principled politics and more like a very expensive midlife crisis. The timing of his resignation was absolutely brutal for Farage. Picture this. Your party's rising star, the man who was supposed to prove reform isn't just for angry white bloke from Surrey, walks out the door faster than a contestant leaving Love Island. The New Statesman even questioned whether Yusuf jumped or was pushed, which in political terms is like asking whether someone fell off a cliff or was given a helpful nudge by their best mate. But here's where Yusuf gets properly clever, and I mean brilliantly, devastatingly clever in that way that makes you simultaneously impressed and slightly terrified. Rather than disappearing into political obscurity like most failed party chairmen, his return as Reform UK's head of a Department of Government Efficiency since June 2025. It's like quitting your job as head chef and coming back as a restaurant critic. Technically a different role, but with infinitely more power to cause chaos. Now, let's talk about this absolute masterclass in political positioning that Yusuf just delivered on GB News. When he talks about masters of the dark arts trying to halt reform surge, he's not just defending his party, he's positioning himself as the intellectual heavyweight who understands the real threats. It's like watching someone diagnose a disease while simultaneously being the cure, and frankly, it's political theatre at its finest. The House of Lords gambit is where Yusuf's strategy gets absolutely diabolical. Here's a man arguing that reform deserves representation in an institution that Farage has spent years calling a disgrace and demanding should be scrapped entirely. Farage previously called for the Lord to be abolished after peers voted for the UK to stay in the EU customs union, but now suddenly needs lordships like a drowning man needs a life jacket. That's not just political inconsistency, that's a complete philosophical U-turn delivered with the confidence of someone who thinks nobody's been paying attention. Yusuf's argument about democratic deficits is politically brilliant because it's mathematically devastating. When he points out that reform polls routinely now at north of 33% but only has 4 MPs, he's not just complaining about the electoral system, he's exposing the fundamental weakness in Farage's entire political project. It's like pointing out that your football team scores lots of goals but never wins matches because they can't play defense. But here's a really spicy part. Yusuf's demand for rapid legislation to deport people, posting on social media with AK-47s and announcing support for the Houthi rebels sounds reasonable until you realize it's essentially arguing that reform needs to compromise with the very establishment institutions they claim to oppose. It's political cognitive dissonance served with a side of pragmatic necessity, and it's absolutely delicious to watch. The letter to Keir Starmer about reform's 4.1 million votes is where this gets properly interesting from a strategic perspective. Farage is basically begging the Prime Minister to legitimize his party by giving them House of Lords representation, which is like asking your worst enemy to validate your existence. It's simultaneously desperate and necessary, which in political terms means it's probably doomed but entertaining to watch. Defense Secretary John Healey's rejection of Farage's demands, characterizing them as attempts to install cronies in the upper chamber, is a kind of political burn that requires industrial-strength aloe vera. But here's the thing, Healey's not wrong, and everyone knows it. When you spend years calling something illegitimate and then desperately want to join it, you're not just being hypocritical, you're advertising your own political weakness to anyone paying attention. What makes Yusuf's position so fascinating is how he's managing to be simultaneously inside and outside the Reform UK power structure. As a Department of Government Efficiency boss, he's technically subordinate to Farage, but as a former chairman with independent wealth and media access, he's got the kind of political freedom that makes party leaders wake up in cold sweats. It's like having a nuclear weapon that thinks for itself. The really clever part of Yusuf's strategy is how he's exposing the contradictions in Reform's entire political philosophy without directly attacking Farage. When he argues a House of Lords representation while maintaining the party's anti-establishment credentials, he's essentially highlighting the impossibility of being a revolutionary party that wants to govern within existing institutions. Its political philosophy meets practical politics, and the collision is spectacular. Think about the position this puts Farage in. Reject Yusuf's arguments and look like you don't understand political strategy. Accept them and acknowledge that your entire anti-establishment brand is basically performance art. Either way, you're admitting that your political project has fundamental flaws that even your own former chairman can see. That's not just political pressure, that's an existential crisis with a media platform. The broader implications of this situation extend far beyond just Reform UK's internal politics. What we're watching is a masterclass in how smart political operators can use institutional knowledge to highlight the contradictions in populist movements. Yusuf isn't destroying Farage through direct attack. He's doing it through supportive arguments that reveal the fundamental weaknesses in Reform's entire political strategy. The media coverage of the situation has been absolutely brutal for Farage because it's not coming from his usual enemies, it's coming from within his own political family. When your former chairman starts making arguments that highlight your philosophical inconsistencies, you're not just facing external criticism, you're dealing with friendly fire that hurts twice as much and lasts twice as long. Here's what's really fascinating about Yusuf's approach. He's not positioning himself as Farage's replacement. He's positioning himself as the intellectual architect of Reform's future success. By taking on the Department of Government Efficiency role, he's essentially saying, I can make this party work, but only if we acknowledge reality instead of living in ideological fantasyland. That's not just political ambition. That's a hostile takeover disguised as helpful advice. The timing of all this couldn't be better for maximum political impact. With Reform polling well but achieving limited parliamentary success, Yusuf's arguments about institutional engagement versus revolutionary purity hit exactly where it hurts most. He's essentially asking, do you want to feel good about your principles, or do you want to actually govern? And in politics, that's not just a strategic question, it's a difference between relevance and irrelevance. What makes this particularly devastating is that Yusuf's criticisms can't be dismissed as partisan attacks because he's making them from within the Reform UK family. When your own Department of Government Efficiency boss starts highlighting the logical contradictions in your political strategy, you can't just blame the mainstream media or political establishment. You have to actually address the arguments on their merits. The House of Lords issue perfectly encapsulates Reform's entire political dilemma. They need institutional legitimacy to achieve their political goals, but seeking that legitimacy undermines their anti-establishment brand. Yusuf isn't creating this contradiction. He's just highlighting it with the precision of a political surgeon and the timing of a master strategist. Thanks for watching UK Pancakes. If this political chess match between former allies has left you wondering whether Yusuf is playing 4D chess while Farage is still learning checkers, smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments whether you think Reform UK can survive having their own intellectual heavyweight pointing out their strategic contradictions.